Cool, okay, well thank you so much for everyone for coming. I'll just give you a little bit of, information on Startup Grind because there's a few new faces here. So Startup Grind is a Google Entrepreneurs-backed initiative. It's actually now in over 120 countries globally and 400 cities. So Wellington has been going for about a year and a half. And it's essentially designed to help you connect with people in your industry and hear from great speakers in the local community and further abroad as well. So you'll get probably a newsletter after this just through signing up, so you're more than welcome to follow us. We'd like to give you some insights, and you can follow us on Twitter and whatnot as well. So today we have the pleasure of hosting Rowan Simpson, so thank you for coming along. Rowan is a founder and investor of multiple successful high-growth New Zealand technology businesses. He was one of the founding team at TradeMe, which we're lucky enough to have hosting us today. He was also the pre-IPO investor in Xero and was the original investor and chair at Vend between 2010 and 2015. And now he continues to work closely as both an investor and an advisor for the next wave of businesses today. So today we'll be chatting to Rowan a bit about his journey and just tap into his awesome wealth of knowledge really, and essentially I'll just be throwing some questions at him for the next 45 minutes or so, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have at the end as well. Cool, so we'll just get started. Okay, well let's start at the beginning of your founder journey really. So back in '99 you founded a flat hunting site. Can you just walk us through that and how that journey unfolded?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the important thing to say from the outset is that all startup stories are lies. So I'll tell you the story and I'll tell you what actually happened. But yeah, the story was I was living in Sydney. I was working as an IT consultant and trying to find a flat to move back to in New Zealand. And so, I would come home on the weekends occasionally, arrive late on a Friday night, and by then all the good flats were gone because the newspaper classifieds were kind of set up that way. And so, yeah, built the site effectively to address that problem. Called flathunt.co.nz, the clue was in the name. Yeah, so that was kind of the inspiration, at least that's the story I told. The reality, if I'm a bit more honest, was, I'm an engineer, and I was looking for something to build, looking for something to play with, the new technologies that were the web technologies that were sort of emerging at the time, and that was as good an idea as any. I sort of was inspired by My Domain, which is a site in Australia that did something kind of similar. Ironically, part of the Fairfax group, given what happened subsequently. But yeah, that was kind of how it all got started. So. Stupidly, foolishly, in some people's opinions, threw that kind of consulting career away and decided to start.
Well, I feel like it's probably been a good choice given where you're at today, so no regrets. And that company was actually acquired by TradeMe, wasn't it? Yeah, so maybe if we chat through that and how that happened and then how you ended up at TradeMe.
Yeah, sure. And same again is kind of the story and the reality. So it was acquired by TradeMe and has, subsequently become TradeMe Property. A lot of that, the original engine that I built, sort of the original version of TradeMe Property. The reality was a little bit more nuanced. So I had worked on Flat Hunt for about 6 months, gotten it to a certain level, had grown kind of as much as I guess I could with my limited marketing / sales skills, and it was sort of break even. I wasn't paying much of anything, but it was covering its costs. And I was starting to run out of money, so I started looking for some work, paid work, and that was around the same time that Sam had just raised his original capital for TradeMe, and he was looking for an engineer, so there was a bit of an overlap. So I started, the original deal was I think 2 days a week, and that became sort of 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week pretty quickly, at which point I kind of I sat down with Sam and Phil McCaw, who was the chair of TradeMe at the time in those early days, and sort of said, it's not really working, and they were like, great, we'll buy you out, and you can come work for us full time. And so yeah, I sold the company and I got some crappy TradeMe shares.
maybe awkward for the trading people here. So Ron was actually the third employee at TradeMe, and ended up leading the dev team. So I imagine that was a huge transition, and you saw many devs start at TradeMe in your time. So I guess it would be good to hear about maybe key lessons you learnt along the way about scaling that development team, and yeah, I guess the key kind of points you felt really made it a successful team.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we did scale the team, and I'll come to that. But there's kind of these lost years of TradeMe which are not really often discussed, and so it's kind of interesting to tell that story too. I mean, for the first 2 or 3 years that I worked at TradeMe, there was no scaling of team. The team was the team, and there were 4 of us effectively. So Jess, who's Sam's sister, and myself, and then Nigel, who we hired. And that was it. Like that was all the resource we had. So there was no thought to scaling the team or anything. That was the team, and we just had to make do with who was there. And then the team shrank.
From 4?
From 4. From 4 to 1.
Wow.
And that may be surprising to just about everybody know, because this is not something that is really told in the history of TradeMe. But we had no business model. The original pitch for TradeMe was only turkeys would pay for classifieds. That was literally what was on the billboard. And so, we were an ad-funded business model effectively, and we weren't really selling many ads. And sort of as a last resort, we implemented success fees and member accounts and that sort of stuff. One of the things I had to build was taking people's email addresses off the site and replacing them with usernames, which is now the whole kind of basis for identity on the site. And that was just done so that people were sort of had to be forced to pay fees. But yeah, I mean, the business model took a long time to kick in, and the company ran out of money more or less, and so we all left. Like I worked for a couple of months, for reducing rates each month, and that got to a point where that wasn't very sustainable for me as well. So yeah, I lived in London and worked over there for 3 years. At one point, Sam and Jess and myself were all in London. We left Nigel running things by himself here.
Oh, Nigel.
He did very well, and we owe him a lot. But yeah, I mean, the company was kept alive just long enough for that business model to kind of kick in. And as history has proven, it's an amazing business model. And so as that ramped, then all of a sudden there was more money, and so eventually we all came back. And I came back in 2004, and that was when we were very much in scaling mode. There was a lot of work done to think about how we were going to effectively hold on to the tail of the tiger at that point and keep things running.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think I've heard that story before, so it's interesting that it was a one-man band for a while. And so I guess continuing on that thread of scaling the team and making these changes, you also led the migration of the platform to .NET, which I imagine would have been a pretty big decision at the time. Can you just walk us through that decision and I guess the factors that led you to changing that tech stack?
Yeah, sure. So the original version of TradeMe was all built in script, VB-script effectively, and the reason for that was just because that was what Sam knew when he was building the first version, and I built Flathun in the same, so we kind of stuck with that. And 5, 6 years later, come 2004, the site was getting pretty big by this point. And yeah, I mean, I had worked on some .NET projects in London and came back and discovered that we'd sort of lost touch with Microsoft a little bit, so that TradeMe's always been a Microsoft tech stack, and I think it still is. If there's TradeMe folks in the room, maybe they can nod. We sort of lost touch a little bit with Microsoft, but we reconnected with them, and it was a very vivid memory of one of the first meetings with them where they kind of looked at our tech stack and sort of shook their heads, looked at each other a bit, and went, how are you doing this? And so, clearly we had to do something. But at the same time, replacing the underlying technology was well down the list of priorities, and so we had to come up with a way to basically rebuild the ship at sea. We needed to keep the wheel turning on all of the things that we were doing at that stage, and so it was a relatively ambitious project. It took a couple of years. We were really lucky we had some of the smaller TradeMe sites. So we started with SafeTrader, which was the smallest, and then Find Someone and Old Friends, and kind of learned from each of those about how to do that migration. we sort of had to invent some of the technology that allowed us to run both in parallel, so that we could sort of do it piecemeal. But yeah, I mean, it was, I look back on that project with a lot of
stress.
No, not so much. More I'm like, delighted that we were able to achieve it. And yeah, it's interesting too to think about why we did it. Like, I struggled for a while to convince anybody that it was a project we should undertake, because the risk of distraction was huge. But ultimately, the thing that kind of tipped the balance in favour of that project was recruitment. Like, we were starting to struggle to hire people who wanted to work on VB script, and so that was kind of motivation enough. And we were lucky to get a couple of devs into the team who had just enough experience to help us get that project across the line. So.
Oh, that's been really great hearing about the trading portion of your journey. And now if we move on, to Xero, where you joined after this really. How was the team and the product like when you joined? What was the state of the team and the product?
Yeah, so I joined prior to the IPO. There's a couple of people in the room today who are part of that team, so I have to tell the honest stories in this case. It was a pretty small team. It was a pretty immature product. I think hopefully people would agree. We had not launched the product at that point, so there were no customers as such. I mean, a lot of the debate at that stage was kind of what's the minimum product we can get away with almost, and narrowing in on who those first users were going to be. So a lot of the feedback on product was pretty negative, because people would just point out like these large areas of the product that were missing or incomplete, and we have to kind of say, yeah, well, but we don't think that's going to stop us from getting those initial customers. But yeah, it was a crazy time. Like the IPO time was nuts. We raised $15 million in the IPO with 100 customers at that point. Pretty much entirely on the reputation, on Rod's reputation and the team's reputation. And my memory I worked there for about a year after that. My memory was not especially fond. Like, those were hard days. Like, we didn't make much progress. I think when I left, we had about 1,200 customers. So, we hadn't moved forward a lot in that time. But yeah, I guess history has shown that it was a big wheel and it was starting to turn. So yeah, fortunate.
Cool, and you mentioned there obviously you were there for about a year, and you actually were in that head of product strategy position. And I guess for maybe some of the product managers that are in the room, or people in charge of product roadmaps in their startups, can you give us a view on what you think are the key traits you need to be a successful product manager in a scaling environment?
Yeah, I mean, my job title at Xero was head of product strategy, but that was really just I had to have something for the business card. The reality is, in those early days, is people did a pretty broad role, so mine was definitely in that camp. I spent much more of my time kind of thinking about analytics and metrics and stuff like that in those days. But yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between product strategy and product management. I think product management is a much more interesting role to me. Like, product strategy feels to me like something where you kind of need to get a small number of things right. And product management is about getting thousands of little things right. And so yeah, I mean, I kind of joke and say the role of a product manager is to keep lists, but that's kind of the reality. Like your job is to kind of hold all of that information in your head, to collect all that information from as many different sources as you can, including your internal teams and your business priorities, your customers and how they're responding to the product, where the weaknesses are, all of those things. And so a large part of the job is actually just kind of keeping those lists and prioritizing those lists. I think the core skill of a product manager is being able to filter and prioritize and get the first things first. Yeah, and I think the other part of it, I've written about this a little, is to kind of get yourself out of the project mentality. I think most people who come to product management roles come from a project background, and the role of managing a product is very different from the role of managing a project. A product is infinite, like it's never finished. I was working on TradeMe in 1999. There's people in the room working on TradeMe today. 19 years later, it makes me sound very old, but it's still not finished. It's probably less finished now than it was then. Like, those lists are longer now than they were then, I'm sure. And so, you know, that mentality of the product's going to be in development forever really forces a bit of a shift in how you think about it. And so the challenge is not, like I always use the analogy of a velodrome, if you imagine a bike race. The challenge is not to ride one perfect lap. Like, a project is about riding one perfect lap, right? But managing a product is about riding as many laps as you can and just kind of, you know, making sure that you kind of learn a little bit each time, I guess. So those are the core skills.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, I like that. And I guess if we kind of look at all the, like across all the startups that you've advised or invested in, do you think that there is a point or I guess a moment of clarity when you just know that it's going to succeed or you know it's going to do well?
Yes, I think if you look at every company that has done well, retrospectively there's a moment where you can kind of point to and say, you know, that's where it was obvious. My experience is it never feels like that at the time, and you can't tell at the time that that's happening. And yeah, I mean, it's always the weight of things too. It's death by the opposite of death by 1,000 cuts. But you know, it's all those little things that you've done that we're talking about in terms of product management start to add up, and the same in terms of business model, the same in terms of commercials. All those things start to add up, and then there's a so-called inflection point. But yeah, that's something you get to look back on fondly afterwards.
Yeah, so it's a reflection versus right now. Yeah. And when we look at the different sort of startups you've invited and some of the different paths that you can take to growth, so Rowan was actually, I guess, advising in one of the investors in Vend, and they had the second biggest funding round of private investments in New Zealand, really. So, and then if you look at somewhere like Timely, which is, I guess, got to that profitability point quite early in its journey, do you tend to think that there's a correct process, or do you tend to have a thought process that you take them through and when they decide what's the right path for them?
Yeah, I think you said it at the end of that question. I think there is probably an optimal right path for each company, but it's different for every company. So yeah, I mean, people talk about Mark Andreessen's famous kind of product market fit distinction, and they're thinking about their product, and I think you can apply a similar sort of thinking to investment. And so, in investment, it's kind of founder-funder fit, if you like. So finding the right investors for you and your venture, and then being really clear about why. I guess you're raising money, what the milestones are, what constraints raising money will remove for you. It kind of blows me away how often you see people celebrating raising money, having not ever really turned their minds to the problem that it solves for them, like as if raising money is an achievement in and of itself. And so I mean, you referenced Vend, like we raised the round that you're talking about, the big round, was actually the fourth round we did. And there's no way we got that fourth round done without the third round, and no way we got the third round done without the second round, and all the way back. And so each of those kind of built on themselves. There were really clear constraints that we removed with each of those, and also I think the thing we did right up to a point was we were kind of always thinking a couple of moves ahead with that too. So one of the things we did well, and I can to the credit the guys at Xero have done the same, is they've kind of always brought in investors at each stage that lifted the bar, if you like, and set themselves up for the next rounds as well.
And let's, I guess, keep on this investment train. So let's chat about Hoku, which is your family office, and I've got the website on the little slide over there, and there's actually a wealth of really awesome blogs if you want to take a read of any of this further stuff that we've chatted about today. So it'd be great just to hear about what the mission of Hoku is, because you've got some pretty impressive stats. So they've had 24 investments made, close to 7 mil invested, and 5 successful exits to date. So yeah, it would just be great to hear a bit more about the mission.
So just to explain, Hoku we set up in 2015 as a bit of an umbrella, I guess, across the various things we've done. So I guess the venture investments are the most well known, but we also have effectively our private investments and also a foundation that we set up after trading sale within that, which is slowly starting to ramp up over these years. So there's a few different moving parts to that. I mean, it's a little bit unusual in that, unlike a VC fund or anything like that, where you know, we're investing our own money, we're not investing other people's money, so that gives us a different, I guess, mentality straight off the bat. But also, it's an evergreen thing. Like, you know, I sort of intend to be investing that for as long as I'm here, and so so that's a bit different as well from the average fund, which kind of, you know, is in and out a little bit. So we're able to be a little bit more patient, I guess, in some of the decisions we're making there. You know, we have no necessity to make investments at all, so we kind of wait for the good ones. You know, the goal is definitely not to invest in the most companies. The goal is to invest in the best companies. Yeah, in terms of mission, I guess I always come back to feedback loops. I think feedback loops fuel everything. And so, you know, feedback loops for ourselves, feedback loops for the people we work with, for the companies we work with. You know, certainly in terms of the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, that's what's, in my opinion, fueling some of the successes that we've seen. You know, the success of Trade Me and Xero might be getting back into the ventures that come next, and a lot of the ventures that I'm working on now, you know, Timely, Atomic, even Vend, have been funded and staffed by people who have come out of those other companies and then have learned the lessons and are applying them. Yeah, and I guess, you know, the broader mission, I guess, is feedback across the whole community in that sense.
Awesome, and it sounds like, you know, from what you're saying, you do really enjoy that active investor relationship, which, you know, does make a lot of sense because you've got so much knowledge to give startups that they shouldn't just look at it as a monetary option, I guess. So I guess, you know, looking at that investor relationship piece, you know, I've read a blog of yours that said that the best, you know, sign of a dying startup is just not hearing from anyone. And so I guess it would be good to maybe get some advice on how startups can keep that investor relationship alive at a good level, and, you know, how should they be updating you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the consistent pattern across every venture that we've invested in that's failed, is that you can kind of plot a point 6 months before that where you know, you stop getting emails about the venture, and it's really good to understand the reasons for that, like why founders go quiet, and often the reason is just that it's just a sense of embarrassment. Like, you know, giving an update when things are going well is really easy, but giving an update when things aren't going well, the inclination is to wait. You know, maybe next month we'll have a better story, and so, you know, people kind of retract, and then next month's not as good, so they retract a bit further, and then the company dies. Like, that's a repeatable pattern I've seen over and over. And so, yeah, I strongly encourage everybody to do the opposite, which is when the story's bad, that's when you should be most actively updating the people who care about your venture. And your investors should be amongst those who care about your venture. Because that's when they can help. Like, if you email me 6 months before you die and say,
that's some advice.
It's not really going well, here's you know, here are the facts. You know, there's a small chance that I might be able to help with that. So yeah, I really encourage people to try and establish that habit early, because if you get into that habit of regularly reporting your status to your investors, then it's going to be easier to do that when the story's not good. If you can get into that habit when the story is okay still, like if you wait until it's bad to start asking for advice, then that's much harder. But yeah, it's incredible how often, you know, thankfully, touch wood, not so much in our portfolio, but it's incredible how often founders will wait until the update they need to send is, we're out of money, are you interested in investing some more? Like, you know, everybody laughs, but that's absolutely common. It's absolutely common. And so, you know, if that's your update, you've lost. It's over. You actually probably shouldn't waste your time sending that update. So yeah, it's a habit that forms, and either you have it or you don't, and it's a discipline to do it even when the story is bad, because that's when the value's highest.
Awesome, and so I guess if we've given obviously a lot of advice to maybe founders looking for an investment, but can we maybe hear about your thoughts on advice to give to potential investors? Like, what do you look for in a startup, or, you know, what's the key things that you should look out for as an investor?
Yeah, I think there's no secret sauce here. Eh? Like I kind of jotted down, I guess, 4 questions that I often fall back on when I'm talking to founders trying to assess an investment opportunity. The first one is, can you explain to me who needs this product so badly today that they'll pay you for it already, even though you've only half finished making it? And most people struggle with the answer to that question. It's a really tough question when you pick into it, but it gets straight to the point of who the early audience for your product is. So I often tell the story of TradeMe. The biggest category in the beginning was computer parts, so it was kits, trading RAM. And, by the time I left, the biggest category was women's wear. I don't know what the biggest category today is anymore. But those are very different audiences, right? They evolve. But you only get to the big audiences if you can get the first audience. So like if you've got a really clear understanding of how this company is going to start, and that helps from an investor's perspective. Another question which I ask is stolen, but it's how will you overcome your obscurity? In the early stages, every company has this problem that no one's ever heard of them, and unless you've got a good answer for getting through that, then that makes it much harder. There's been a lot said about Xero's product, and they've been massively successful and massively underrated, and all that is the accountant's channel that they tapped into on the early stage. That was an amazing way to overcome obscurity and get to customers, second degree kind of thing. The third question is, what are you doing that's hard? And that's useful from an investor's perspective to understand what's kind of what's the defensible bit of this venture. Like if everything you're doing somebody else could do, it's not a good sign. So understanding what the real difficulty is, or the problem that you solve that others are going to struggle to solve. And then, last and probably almost most importantly is, why do you, this is an investor asking a founder, but why do you want this product to exist? Right, okay. Why is that important? And that starts to get to understand whether the founder really has the enthusiasm to see it through. And share maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah. And if we move on to the tech landscape in New Zealand, because a lot of the startups you work with have gone global, how do you think that the global technology world views New Zealand as a sort of a startup hub? What are your views on how we're placed in the world?
New Zealand, if you look at it, in terms of GDP, slightly bigger than Greece, slightly smaller than Peru. So ask yourselves what you think of the tech ecosystems in Greece and Peru. It's probably about the best answer I could give.
Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, well, what about if we look at, I guess a pretty hot topic at the moment is the CTO saga that's been in New Zealand, and I guess that probably feeds into the overall discussion of how we grow New Zealand tech industry and keep it all connected. Do you have any views on how the government should be approaching our tech community growing in a different way? Do you have any thoughts on how the best approach would be to connect this all together?
These questions are getting harder. I have some opinions. I feel like enough white dudes have already given their opinion on the CTO role. It's an odd role. I think it's a bit of an ink blot test. Everyone projects their own kind of pet peeve onto that role. So yeah, I probably won't add to the already following Eunice commentary on that. I think folks in the room have a much bigger role to play than the government in terms of creating an ecosystem. I think the clue is in the name ecosystem. The way ecosystems grow in the natural world is that biomatter kind of gets recycled. And there's going to be big trees and small bushes and big animals and small animals in that ecosystem. And that'll be the same with our tech ecosystem once we're successful. And we're still in the early innings of building that. But if you go back to the start of your questions, in '99 there was no ecosystem. And successes like TradeMe and Aftermail, which was Rowan Simpson prior to Xero, and others, created some of that early biometa, in my opinion, and it's pretty amazing now to see, in some cases, second or third degree, kind of wave companies coming from people who have worked in those ventures, and capital getting recycled. That's how an ecosystem grows from the bottom up.
Yeah. Cool. We'll maybe go back to an easy question then. Talk about you in your next few years. So I've heard that you're working on a new product called One Metric. It'd be good to maybe just hear a little bit more about what that might look like, and I don't know, any other thoughts you've got on your next few years?
Yeah, I mean, One Metric is a side project which is starting to run away on me a little bit, so I need to be careful. But yeah, it's something I've been working on, I guess, for a year, 18 months, quietly, and in the last few months slightly less quietly. And it really came from a personal pain point. We talked a little bit before about that regular reporting cycle. So when we set up Oku in 2015, one of the things that I threw at Sasha, who we hired to run that with us, was go out and build just a basic dashboard for all these companies that we've invested in. So we had an oversight, a regular oversight, and we almost completely struck out on that. Like almost entirely failed to do that for any of the companies, and it was really eye-opening to see how much people were struggling with even the basics in terms of that reporting piece. And so, yeah, I spent a bit of time really trying to understand why. Like, why is it so hard for founders to establish that habit and share their numbers? And One Metric is a response to that, I guess. Still in the very early stages of working out what I've built is actually going to address that problem or not. In beta at the moment, and the feedback is, to be honest, with everybody right across the spectrum. Some people love it, some people don't get it at all. And it's it's kind of hard but interesting. Like, I think it's really continuing to pull on that thread and see what happens. So that's something I'm going to keep working on over the next wee while. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to point at really, but if anybody's interested, one of the things I have done with this, I feel like I'm in a really privileged position in terms of starting a new project, in that it doesn't matter if it works or not for me, and that's a really unusual position. Right? And so I decided it would be quite interesting just to kind of talk out loud about that as I went. Like the stories you get to hear about startups are nearly always told by people who get invited to sit on chairs like this after they've been successful. But yeah, it's way more interesting to me to kind of hear the stories as you go, because then you get to hear the story, you get to hear the actual story. Right, you get to hear the, I just wanted to learn ASP, not the, while I was living in Sydney, I wanted to find a flat. And so yeah, it's kind of, if you go to blog.onemetric.io, I've been just posting videos of the product as I've been building, and occasional posts about what I'm thinking about and working on as I work through that. There hasn't been a post for a few weeks, which is pretty telling, because I've been busy on other things, and so I need to write a post soon about distraction, and how hard it is to retain focus on a product when you're working on it on the side, and things like that hopefully are part of the story I can tell. So then even, the thing about that is, even if the product doesn't hit the mark, I'll at least have that as a record of the process that I went through.
Awesome. That's just been so great hearing about your journey. Thank you so much for, I guess, all the insight.